The message came just after midnight, and it was only one sentence long. "Don't bother coming to the wedding, Iris. It's not your day." No greeting, no warmth, just that cold sentence glowing on my screen. I stared at it for a long time, and then I laughed, because of course this was how it would end. I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and whispered to the empty room, "Fine? Then it's not my day." The next morning, I booked a flight to Maui. When people in our small Washington town talked about the Holbrook family, they spoke like we were perfect. A neat blue house with flower boxes on the porch, a father who led every church fundraiser, a mother who baked for school fairs, and 2 daughters who never made trouble, except one of us shined brighter than the other. That was Evelyn. Everyone said she was the kind of person light seemed to follow. And me, I was the quiet one, the helper, the one who made sure things stayed together when no one else was looking. Even as a kid, I learned that my value came from fixing things, not from being seen. So when Evelyn got engaged, no one was surprised when I stepped in to help. It was what I always did. My company, Halcyon Events, had been my life for 6 years. I built it from scratch, working double jobs and sleeping on couches while I saved for supplies. I loved the order and the beauty of it all, turning chaos into calm, making joy look effortless. So when Evelyn asked me to plan her wedding, I said yes. Without hesitation, I told myself it would bring us closer, that maybe this time she would finally look at me like an equal, and not just the one who cleaned up after her. The first few months were a blur of long nights and early mornings, spreadsheets, table maps, floral mock-ups. The venue was a vineyard in Northern California, a place with old olive trees and golden fields that glowed at sunset. I did everything without charge because family was family, or at least that was what I believed. When she couldn't decide between 2 colors for the table runners, I stayed up until dawn, arranging samples. When the caterer pulled out, I called in a favor from another client. Every time something went wrong, I fixed it. That was my role. The first sign that things were cracking came late one night when my phone buzzed. "Hey, can you cover the last florist payment since you already paid the deposit? It's easier that way, I'll send it later." "No, please. No, thank you." No sense that she was asking for a favor. Just assumption, I typed back. "That was my gift, Eve. I can't pay more." She replied fast. "It's not that deep. Don't make it awkward." I put the phone down and felt the heat rise in my chest but said nothing. When I mentioned it to Mom, she gave that tired sigh she always gave when the topic made her uncomfortable. "Sweetheart, your sister is stressed. Try not to add to it." So I stayed quiet. Weeks passed, and I could feel myself fading again. Every call from my parents was about the wedding, about Evelyn's nerves, about things I needed to fix. Not once did anyone ask if I was tired or overwhelmed. It was like my exhaustion was just part of the furniture. Then one afternoon, my father called, cheerful as ever. "We're all pitching in for Evelyn and Daniel's house gift." He said, "Your part is $2,000, just transfer it this week." I took a slow breath and said, "Dad, I'm not even invited to the wedding anymore." There was silence. Then he said, "This isn't about that, Iris. It's about family. Don't punish your sister over a little disagreement." A little disagreement, he said, as though being cut out entirely was nothing. Later that week, I saw pictures on social media. My cousin had posted photos from Evelyn's bridal shower. It was at the same garden cafe I had recommended. The flowers, the theme, the outfits, all things I had chosen. Every smiling face was one I knew, except mine. The caption said, "The Dream Team, celebrating the bride-to-be." I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling, feeling something cold and sharp bloom behind my ribs. 10 days before the wedding, she called again. "The band canceled, you have to fix it," she said. I let the silence stretch before answering. "I'm not your planner anymore, Eve," she screamed. "Are you serious after everything I've done for you? You're really going to do this now?" I hung up. No apology, no explanation, just the click of finality. That night I sat alone, surrounded by stacks of papers, contracts, invoices, all signed under my business. Every vendor, every detail was tied legally to Halcyon Events. Not to her, I had never thought much about it, but as I read the contracts, one line stood out like a flare. Final balance due 7 days before event. If payment not received agreement is void. It hit me like a shock. The wedding didn't belong to her. It belonged to me. I met with my attorney Naomi the next day in a quiet cafe. She flipped through the documents and said simply, "You're the client of record. If the balance isn't paid, you have full right to cancel." I asked, "Is that cruel?" She said, "No, it's fair. They treated your business like free labor. You're just taking your work back." That night, I drafted 4 short emails, one for each vendor, as the client on record for the Holbrook Hayes event scheduled for July 22nd. I will not be submitting the final balance. Please consider this notice of cancellation refunds to be processed to Halcyon Events. I set them to send at 9 in the morning. Then I made tea, sat by the window and waited for dawn. At 9 the next morning the emails went out. No noise, no drama, just quiet release. By noon, I imagined Evelyn's phone buzzing as she sat somewhere choosing nail colors, the venue, the caterer, the florist all calling her one by one. By mid-afternoon she called me screaming. "What did you do?" she shouted. I said calmly, "I didn't do anything, I just stopped paying for something that doesn't involve me." She shrieked, "You ruined my wedding." "No, I said you did that when you decided I wasn't part of it." Mom's voice came next, full of fury. "Iris, fix this. Right now," I said. "I can't. It's over." Dad yelled in the background, demanding I return the money. "That money was never a gift." I said it was business. Then I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I felt steady. The messages came non-stop after that. Voicemails, texts, even knocks on my door. I ignored them all. 3 days later, I packed my suitcase, went to the airport, and watched the rain blur the windows as my plane lifted from Seattle. The clouds swallowed the city, and I felt light for the first time in years. For once, the chaos was not mine to carry. The air in Maui was thick with salt and warmth, and I felt the wind slide against my skin like a promise. For the first few days, I did nothing but breathe. I walked along the shoreline in the mornings, letting the waves bury my feet in wet sand, and I watched the sun rise through pale clouds. It felt strange to have no messages to answer, no lists to check off, no one waiting for me to fix their world. Silence had a weight of its own, and at first it frightened me. But slowly I began to feel that the quiet was something sacred. I stayed in a small inn near Lahaina, a place with chipped paint and white curtains that fluttered at night. The owner, a soft-spoken woman named Lani, brought me fruit every morning and told me that rest was a kind of work too. I laughed when she said it, but over time I began to understand. Each day I woke a little lighter. I swam in the ocean and let the salt sting my skin until I felt clean. I stopped checking my phone, stopped glancing at the clock, stopped apologizing for being still. On the 5th day, I sat on a rocky cliff watching a group of newlyweds taking photos below. Their laughter floated up through the breeze. Instead of bitterness, I felt something else, something almost tender. They were strangers, and their joy had nothing to do with me. But for the first time, I wished them well without the ache of comparison. That surprised me more than anything. When I finally turned my phone on again, there were more than 200 messages, some from family, some from old clients, and a few from unknown numbers that I guessed belonged to Evelyn's friends. The first was from my mother. "Iris, please call your sister. She is devastated. This has gone too far." Then another from my father. "We can still salvage this if you apologize." The last one from Evelyn simply said, "I hate you." I stared at the words and waited for the sting, but it never came. It felt like reading a story I had already finished long ago. I wrote one short message to my parents. "I hope she is all right, but I will not fix this. Please respect my decision." Then I turned off the phone again and dropped it in my bag. The ocean kept roaring and the sky kept changing, and I realized that nothing out there cared about the Holbrook name or who planned whose wedding. The world just moved forward, and I was finally moving with it. A week later, a message found its way through to my work email from a client I had helped months before. She wrote, "I heard what happened with your family. You handled it with grace. Would you be open to planning our company's winter gala?" I stared at the screen for a long moment and then typed, "Yes." The job was large enough to steady my finances, and soon I was sketching ideas on the balcony while the waves murmured below. It felt good to work again on my own terms. By the time I flew home, the vineyard wedding had turned into local gossip. People said the bride and groom held a rushed ceremony in a backyard under a sagging tent. Guests sat in lawn chairs drinking store wine while someone played music from a phone. The pictures leaked onto social media and vanished just as fast. I didn't look for them. What would be the point? When I arrived back in Washington, autumn was already beginning. The air smelled of pine and rain. I opened the door to my apartment, and it felt like stepping into another life. The plants on the windowsill had survived. Somehow I sat on the floor and laughed softly. The laughter came out shaky and new, like it belonged to someone else. A week later, I received a letter from my father. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. He wrote that things had been hard, and that Evelyn blamed everyone but herself. He said, "Your mother misses you, and so do I. We were wrong to ask you to fix things that were never yours to fix." He ended it with, "Please come for dinner if you ever wish to." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to see them yet, but it meant something that they finally saw what I had been carrying all these years. Business picked up again. Slowly, I rebranded my company, changed the logo, changed the website, changed the tone. No more free work. No more endless favors, no more bending myself to fit into other people's comfort. I started hiring help, younger planners eager to learn. When one of them asked why I chose the name Solace Events, I told her, because peace is worth protecting. Months passed and winter settled in. Sometimes I would pass a store window and see my reflection. For a heartbeat, I would see the old version of me, the one who measured her worth by how much she gave away. But then I would blink and see the new one, grounded, steady, quietly, certain. On a gray February morning, I got a message from an unfamiliar address. It said, "I know I hurt you. I was cruel and selfish, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did for me once." It was signed Evelyn Hayes. I read it twice and then closed it. There was no anger left, only a soft sense of distance, like watching a storm that had already passed over spring came, and with it a sense of calm I had never known. One evening I drove to the coast and walked until the sky turned violet. The tide rolled in slow and steady. I thought about the girl I had been, the fixer, the invisible one. I whispered to her that she could rest now. The wind carried the words away, and I felt lighter than I ever had. Life did not suddenly turn perfect. There were still quiet days when the past tried to reach for me, but each time it did, I remembered the night I sent those emails and how still the world had been afterward. That stillness was the moment I learned what freedom truly sounded like. It was the sound of silence after years of noise. I watched the horizon fade and knew that the story was no longer about loss or revenge. It was about choosing peace over approval, choosing self-respect over belonging. Iris Holbrook had ended there on that stormy day in July. The woman who stood by the ocean now was simply Iris, nothing more and nothing less, and for the first time in her life, that was enough. The waves rolled against the shore, soft and endless, and I stood barefoot watching the horizon turn gold. The air smelled like salt and morning coffee. The sound of the ocean felt like a heartbeat, steady and free. I thought about everything I had lost and realized it was not loss at all, it was release. For years I had carried the weight of their expectations. I had tried to earn love that was never really love, only control. I had been the quiet helper, the invisible hand that made everything shine for them while I faded into the background. But now the silence was mine and it was peaceful. My phone still buzzed sometimes with messages I did not read. Some were angry, some sounded almost sorry. I let them sit unanswered. They had built a life that only worked if I kept holding it up, and I had finally stepped away. The walls they built with pride and judgment had cracked without me lifting another finger. On the beach, I thought of my grandmother who used to say strength is not in how much you give, but in knowing when to stop giving. I finally understood her words completely. Standing there with the wind in my hair and the sea at my feet, I felt something new, not pride, not revenge, just freedom. They could keep their perfect pictures and hollow words. I had my peace. I had my own life now, the kind where I did not have to beg to be seen, the kind where I could breathe without asking permission. Sometimes walking away is not losing, it is winning quietly without applause. I did not destroy anything. I just stopped holding up what was never mine to carry, and as the sun rose over the water, I whispered to myself, "You are finally free."